Good afternoon, Manitoba Major Junior Hockey League fans. We're live on our website, gshow.ca, our main website, that is, as we also have another one technically now in our Uscreen service on gshowproductions.uscreen.io. But it's also live on our YouTube channel right now. This is the mmjhl podcast. It's season 3, episode 11. I hope you are all doing well. On this late Thursday afternoon, just after 4 o'clock, we got a couple of mmjhl game days in store tonight. Unfortunately, they haven't been posted on the website yet, hoping that they show up there soon. But yeah, gshowproductions.uscreen.io is where you'll be able to find it, and that's also where you'll be able to find our games. We're going to post them in the news section under our website, so it'll make it easier for you to find if you'd rather go through our main website, gshow.ca. But in today's episode, trade deadline. It's technically more of a roster freeze. Teams have to get down to 25 player roster by Saturday, January 10th. So not tomorrow, but Saturday is going to be the trade deadline. And in terms of, just the specifics, is that rosters will be frozen once teams reach 25 cards, meaning 25 players on their roster. If they do have less, they can still add a carded player that was not dropped from another team. So just to give you some clarity on that, in terms of the trades, it seemed like last year was a busier trade deadline compared to this one. I know that the MMJHL hasn't been posting as many trades. I know that the Jets and the Raiders made a trade to start off the season, which sent Braden Larveld over to the Raiders Junior Hockey Club. St. Vital, St. Boniface, they've been in the mix with each other, making a bunch of trades. But yeah, other than that, haven't seen too much from around the league. What I'm going to be doing in this episode is just strictly giving my opinion. These aren't players that are rumored to be dealt, but just in my opinion, taking a look at their age, where teams are in the position they're at, how these players are performing. Could a trade maybe give them a bit of a fresh start, a bit of a bounce back in their game this season. This isn't all set in stone in terms of who's going to be moving on this year at the trade deadline in terms of the predictions I'll be giving here. But yeah, I think it's always just fun to kind of just give predictions on stuff like this, and excited to get into that coming up next on this edition of the MMJHL podcast. But before we do that, just want to let you in on where the teams sit in the standings. The Transcone Railer Express, an absolute wagon, a train that just keeps on rolling. They're now up to 16 straight wins at 130 goals for, and only 47 against. Their power play, one of the best in the league. Their penalty kill, the best in the league. St. Boniface, they're close behind them, but until the momentum stops for Transcona, St. Boniface is going to have to keep, their wins up to keep pace with the hottest team in the MM right now. The Charleswood Hawks, they built up a 3-game win streak for themselves. It's been a 2-game win streak for the Stonewall Jets. We've seen the St. James Junior Canucks rise up the standings as the season has gone along, and most recently they went toe-to-toe with the best team in the league right now this past Sunday, just falling 4-3 to the Transcona Railer Express in a game where, Transcona put up a lot of shots, but St. James able to keep it close, and the way they're playing, that's kind of expected right now, especially when Transcona, it's been a while since they've lost, right? You're going to get the best from your opponent, and one of the best teams in the league right now is the St. James Junior Canucks at that. As for St. Boniface, an 8-0 victory over the Raiders Junior Hockey Club, a team that continues to slide down the standings as the season has gone along. They're now, of course, holding the final 8th playoff spot at this point in time. The losing streak continues for the St. Vital Junior Victorias right now. Really feel bad for this group right now. They're losers of 9 straight. They'll be looking to change that tonight against the River East Royal Knights. We'll get into that matchup later on, where River East has dropped their last 3 games. One of the best teams to start off in the MMJHL, cooled down a bit as this season has gone along. And as for Fort Garry, they were riding in with a lengthy losing streak themselves, but finally got back in the win column with a 3-0 win over the Twisters on Sunday at Century Arena. By the way, you can check out that game on our Ustream service. It is archived right now. As for the points on the mmjhl, these get archived every season, and it's great to see how tight it's been this year. Cole Davis still at the top, but now tied with Gavin Halad for the league lead in points. Nathan Brzezinski right behind those two with a significant drop in terms of games played compared to Cole Davis and Gavin Halad, as he's played 4 less games. As you can see, Jaden Ward, he's been a breakout star this year in the mmjhl for this St. James Junior Canucks team, leading by example on the ice with his skill set. And then, of course, some familiar names. Peyton Bateman still in this top 5, and welcome Nolan Vandenbush. Haven't seen him in the top 5 this year for a while at this point. His teammates in goal, Sage Delarone and Thomas Wyatt, have been really solid in goal. In fact, both only combined for 2 losses. A shutout for Wyatt, as well as for Delarone, 4 shutouts, stunning save percentage, and the most wins in the league. If you want to check out these full stats, check out the mmjhl's website at mmjhl.ca. And then we got some players of the month to get into as well. I feel like these aren't really a surprise. Jaden Ward had himself a sensational month, almost 3 points per game. Are you kidding me? At 2.83. Sage Delarone, 4 wins, 9.54 save percentage. Only 6 goals allowed in those games that he played. Really efficient right now. Drew Russell making some noise for the Twins, 2 points per game through December. And then Cole Warsaba keeping it up. It's his 2nd straight Defenseman of the Month win, as he's been able to make impacts on both sides of the ice, both in his own end, but offensively here, most notably with 14 points in 6 games played. That's over 2 points per game as a defenseman in that span. Absolutely wild. As for the Junior Canucks, is this a team that could be, in my opinion, a seller at deadline? Well, I'll fill you in on a spoiler. I don't quite think so. We'll get into all of that coming up next on the mmjhl podcast, as we get set for a doubleheader too on our mmjhl game day coverage this Thursday night, coming up in a few hours. But till then, we're going to keep the good times rolling here. You're going to hear from Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia, and I'll be back in just a moment.
Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia offers the widest selection of sports cards and signed memorabilia in the city. For dedicated casual and new collectors, Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia has everything a collector could ask for. Everything we sell is stored with care, and with help from our knowledgeable team, we'll help you find exactly what you're looking for. We carry Upper Deck hockey card brands like Series 1 and 2, The Cup, Ultimate, SPA, and plenty more. So what are you waiting for? Come down to Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia, Winnipeg's premier sports cards and memorabilia store.
Welcome back to the mmjhl podcast, solo show today. I was hoping to have a guest on, but that'll have to wait until next week. Great to be here on this Thursday. Trade deadline is upon us. Well, pretty much technically known as a roster freeze, but we're going to call it the 2026 trade deadline. And yeah, we're going to go through all of these teams. It's not to say these teams will be buyers, sellers at this point with 2 days left, but just kind of where these teams stand right now. It's just opinion-based, what I think teams could potentially do. But for Pembina Valley, it's either you stand pat or sell. Look, playoffs realistically is pretty much out of the picture at this point, but you, I think, got a lot to like more so at this point in the season compared to how things have started off. This group has been able to compete more in games. They've kept scores lower as the season has gone along, even coming away with a few wins as well for themselves, and proving that, this team, can go out and give their fans something to cheer about. But the reason I have Thomas Cohen, the team captain here, is he's a 2004 born player. He's going to be aging out this year. He's more so known for, I'd say, his defensive play more than his point totals, as he's never really been a big point getter at all. But yeah, just the fact that he is the captain of this team, you bring him into your bottom six as a depth piece. Maybe you can sure up a check-in type of role in your bottom six for teams that may need it. And Thomas Cohen, it could just give him a chance to play for a championship again, as that looks like it could potentially. Well, I'd say not potentially. It's not in the cards for Pembina Valley this year. Being brutally honest, and the stats, the standings have indicated that so far. But then Owen Van Robes and Josh Guilford, I just put them in here because these are two of their top point getters, and teams may be interested in that if they were to go after some Pembina Valley players. But yeah, I'd say at this point, stand pat, continue to build with this group you have this year, and set your sights on next year. Maybe you get active, but it's not a necessity for your team. As for the Victorias, for me, it's either you stand pat or sell at this point. This 9-game losing streak for the Vics have really put them into this tough position where going into the new year and their losing ways continued, they were already a few points out of a playoff spot, and that gap has already gotten bigger. The Twins have proven, I think, for the most part this year that they most likely will sneak into the playoffs. I think that St. James at this point have proven that they're only going to get better, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them even rise up to fifth place, solidifying their spots in the middle of the pack here. And as for St. Vital, it's just the losses continuing to pile up have put them in a hole where, we've talked about it already with their current head coach this year in Tyler Anderson, and he said that it's a young group this year, right? And maybe the approach is a bit different, and maybe you take a bit of a different approach where you sell like the Vics have. Usually this team is more of a buyer compared to a seller throughout the past few years, and they've already proven that they've been sellers this year, right? With trading away players like Connor Mitchell, trading away the Andersons most recently, right? And the other moves that this team has been able to make, bringing in Aaron Bertschinger, getting even younger with these moves. And, these aren't set in stone, but Luke Elliott, he's one of the few 04s left on this group. This is a player that does a lot of little things well and can score big goals in big moments, as we've seen throughout the past years. I feel like he could get some interest, but the player with the most interest, I feel like, from the Victorias would have to be Blake Goretzky. Now he's an 05. He has a season left next year, and I feel like the Vics probably want to hold on to this guy. But he definitely is probably the biggest seller on this Victoria's team, just given what a game changer he can be on a team's back end. And if you're one of those contenders, like the Transcone Railer Express, for example, Riel is just naming the top teams off the top of my head. The Charleswood Hawks, I feel like, for a player like Blake Goretzky could be a great fit, given that they don't really have the same game changers as they once have had on their blue line. But if we're being honest, I think that the Vics probably go with the first part, stand pat, rather than sell. I don't think that, they'll probably want to part with Goretzky unless he wants out. I feel like at this point he's probably going to stay on this team, and then he's going to be a huge part of this group next year. Maybe if they're struggling again, he gets dealt, given that he'll age out, and they look to get more value back for him at that time. But yeah, the Vics, they've been more of a seller this year. I feel like at this point they probably stand pat, but those two players, if any, would be players I'd expect teams to be calling in for. Maybe we see some action around those players. But heading into the Raiders, you're kind of in a similar position as you have been these past few years at this point, right? Like you're on the verge of making playoffs. You're a lower seed. You have players that, of course, are going to age out coming into next year from this year. It's kind of the norm with every team in this league, right, in junior hockey. But as for the Raiders, it's kind of been a tradition for them to be a huge seller. You know, around trade deadline, usually selling more of their veterans to get younger as a group. We haven't seen them that active in the trade category this year. The only big move that they really made was bringing in a guy like Larveld to this group. But as for the players, they're players that I could see them selling potentially. These are players on the older side, of course. Ashton Henry, he's an 04 born player, similar to Thomas Cohen in terms of leadership abilities. I think teams would love to add in a player like Ashton Henry and a player with comparing him to Thomas Cohen. He has significantly more upside, I think, offensively, and has scored some big time goals throughout his time with the Raiders Junior Hockey Club. Then you take a look at players like Devin Whiteside, for example. I think a player that could bring in, potentially a lot of attention for himself. A player that is, if we just take a look, as I don't see. Oh, now I see Whiteside on the roster. Yeah, just a player that may need a change of scenery, right? A player that is an 04 born player, and you look at his stats this year compared to other years, he's never really been a big point getter, but we've seen a significant drop off. So maybe he could benefit from a change of pace. And then I put Ethan Jared here as well. Just because for himself, let me take a look. He's also, a defenseman that, hasn't put up a lot of points, but usually been pretty solid in his own end, and he's an 04 as well. So if teams are looking to get maybe a bit better on the defensive side, adding a bit more, edge, a bit more grit to those positions, maybe those could be players that they're looking at targeting if teams have been calling into the Raiders Junior Hockey Club, right? And then, of course, Ashton Henry, good offensive upside for the type of player he is, and, his leadership abilities or what I think could be a draw for teams too, right? But as for the Canucks, simply put, I think they stand pat. I don't think this team should be a seller. I don't think this team should be a buyer unless, the perfect move to help put your team over the top at this point falls in your lap. But this is a team coming into the season that only had one player that was going to age out in terms of their captain in Carter Osterman Caden Osterman, their captain. But other than that, this team has a lot of 05s, 06s that are set to come back for the next few seasons, right? And at this point, you look at them in the standings, they started off out of a playoff spot, but have now risen up in the standings with high-powered offense. This team has also put up the most shots per game in the league and have gotten some pretty solid performances out of their goaltending as of late from a guy like Connor Murphy, who has gotten pretty much all of the games this year. I'd say, the only thing maybe you could add is maybe you go out and look to add in more experience. Maybe you look to go out and add, more, stability in your net by getting experience and goal. But I just don't feel like those pieces at that point are out there for if St. James were to make a move for it to make a significant difference for this lineup at this point. I think you just roll with your lineup, your guys that you have right now. Ryan Dick and his coaching staff has this team playing exactly how they need them and want them to play. An aggressive team that plays with the chip on their shoulder and has been led by the likes of guys like Jaden Anderson, Nicholas Cullen. Robertson has scored some pretty goals this year. Cole Warsaba on the back end, back-to-back Defenseman of the Month awards under his belt. And then this team has other options around that. It's a fast team, and I feel like, unless there's significant game breaker that's available that may be unhappy with his current situation that you can go out and add, I, I'd stand pat if I'm this team, and trust in this group to maybe pull off some magic come playoff time. Overall, it's been a successful season, I'd say, for St. James that I feel like is only going to get better, and just that culture they're looking for it to continue to build here the right way with Ryan Dick and that coaching staff. As for the Twins, I say you stand pat as well. Listen, going into this year, I was critical of this Fort Garry team in terms of I felt like they drop off significantly due to the amount of talent that they lost, and they have dropped off quite a bit to their standards last year. But this is a team that's fully in the playoff race and is probably going to be in the playoffs. At this point, they, you know, haven't shown really any indications throughout the past 2 years that they're going to be a very active team come trade deadline. They really only made one big move last year, and that was to go out and get Rylan Hughing. I feel like this season, compared to last year, like last year they were gearing up with the group they have, a very veteran heavy group, and I mean, it looked like that move was one of the only moves they need to make because they go out finish first place. Disappointing end to the season, of course, in the playoffs. But this year, a much younger team, and the rookies have been making a huge impact. When you talk about guys like Drew Russell, who, of course, just won Rookie of the Month for this squad. Alex Paul's in net has been really good. I think he's been this team's MVP. And look, the reality is you're probably going to finish in the bottom four of the top 8 playoff spots. And that's okay if you're Fort Garry. I think this is a year where it's kind of a bit of a reset. Try to see what you have out of this group. And they got to be happy, I think, with the rookies, like I said, Drew Russell, Lucas Spencer, Luca Biancourt has done some great things. We've seen, flashes from their rookies this year that I think got to excite this Fort Garry Twins team. But yeah, you're not really in a position, I'd say, to be a buyer, but you're not really in a position to be a seller as well because you're already a fairly young team. And, I think the expectation for them just to trust the process, as always, under Coach Scott Wong. But I think if this group was to get to the playoffs, they'd be happy. It's looking like they're on track for that now. And look, they got some, I think, promising good pieces on this squad that they'll want to hold on to and try to build off of this season heading into next year. But yeah, I feel like for Fort Garry, I would stand pat if I were them. No real reason to make any big moves or sell what you got given the position you're in. As for the River East Royal Knights, for me, this team is a buyer or they stand pat. Now, look, I don't really see them moving off from Andrew Caron, who is their oldest defenseman and is, he plays in so many situations. And for Ralph Padua, he hasn't been in the lineup consistently this season. I don't have the total insight. I'm not sure if he's been battling an injury or not. But yeah, I mean, Ralph Padua has been a player that they've traded for, a couple of years ago. He's a player that I feel like maybe wouldn't be opposed to being traded. But I feel like this group probably holds on to him as well as Andrew Caron, just given Caron's experience in this league and given that this team, their goal at this point is to contend for a championship, to take it as far as they can take it with this group that they have. I don't see them being a seller and selling any big talent because, this team, when they have sold, they're way out of the playoff race, right? And that's just not the case this year. I think that this has been a huge step forward for this organization where they're at. I just feel like putting those players on there, Andrew Caron and Ralph Padua, those could be players that could draw interest from teams and players that I feel like they'd be, well, more so Padua over Caron probably, but players that they'd probably be willing to move off of. But just seeing Caron, the type of roles that he's played in this season, especially against the St. Boniface Riels, they're going to be expecting some big things out of him down the line. They're going to continue to play him big minutes most likely, and he's going to play in different situations. And yeah, this team, they're just hoping that Raf Padua can get going even more. Just taking a look at Raf's stats this year. Go to the mmjhl's website, mmjhl.ca. For Raf Padua. Yeah, he's only played 10 games this year, but has still put up 5 points. So, yeah, I feel like that could maybe intrigue some teams, and given how deep this River East squad is, maybe could afford to give up a player like Raf Padua, but I think they'll want to keep this whole group together, of course. You take a look at Andrew Karen, not the biggest point getter, but so what's the word I'm trying to look for? So reliable in his own end, and like I said, can play in many different situations. I feel like if I'm a championship contender, Andrew Karen is a player that I'd love to add to my squad to add even more stability in there. But I feel like River East feels they're a championship contender, and yeah, they're probably wanting to hold on to one of their most valuable defensemen in Mr. Just gotta check his number to make sure I got it right. Number 6 in Andrew Karen. But we're going to get into, I guess, the next 4 teams coming up next. We're going to throw it to another commercial break here, and then I'll be back on this edition of the MMJHL podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in if you are to this one, everybody. We got a busy night ahead of us in the MMJHL, which, makes me pretty excited. I hope you're excited too.
Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia offers the widest selection of sports cards and signed memorabilia in the city. For dedicated casual and new collectors, Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia has everything a collector could ask for. Everything we sell is stored with care, and with help from our knowledgeable team, we'll help you find exactly what you're looking for. We carry Upper Deck hockey card brands like Series 1 and 2, The Cup, Ultimate, SPA, and plenty more. So what are you waiting for? Come down to Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia, Winnipeg's premier sports cards and memorabilia store.
And welcome back to this edition of the MMJHL podcast. Previews before trade deadline here, episode 11 in season 3. Before we get into more of this, just spoiled something. I didn't do the right thing there in terms of bringing up the right image. There we go. This is the action ahead of tonight. Unfortunately, I don't think viewers will be able to access the games through the MMJHL's website directly, but we will have it available on our Uscreen service. That's where it's going to be live. We'll also post the link to St. Vital River East, probably on our main website, gshow.ca. You can only post one link at a time. Through our live stream button, where you can just click on it, it takes you right to the game. But we're probably going to link Transcona Stonewall as well in our upcoming events tab on gshow.ca as well, so it's as easy as possible for you to find it. But yeah, gshowproductions.uscreen.io is the main place where you will be able to find all the games that we broadcast this season in the MMJHL. But moving on, we've talked about the Twins and other teams, as well as the River East Royal Knights. As for the Jets, moving on to them, I feel like heading into this trade deadline, it's either you're a buyer or you stand pat. I'm, borderline huge believer in this team. I was a believer in this team heading into the season as being a championship contender. The thing that would put me into full belief is them as a full-blown championship contender is if they're able to continue to put up big wins as the season goes along, and they've started to put more big wins together right heading into the new year. They took down the St. Boniface Riels, even though it was an extra time and a shootout. Also able to defeat the Charleswood Hawks a bit earlier on from that the date of their game between the St. Boniface Reals and them when they got that one. Actually, I'm gonna pull up their schedule right now so we can get the specifics. But yeah, I mean, Stonewall's a team that I feel like has just gotten better as the season has gone along. Had a lot of talent heading into this season up front with, I think, a really promising goaltender in net, and we've just seen all of those pieces continue to get better for this team as the season's gone along. Um, and also, they've been, for the most part, in their victories, keeping their opponent's scores down, which I think is pretty promising to see too. They were able to defeat St. Boniface in overtime back on December 11th, 3-2. So not in a shootout, and you know, before that for this team, only losing 4-1 to a red hot Transcon Railer Express squad. Back on November 23rd, they were able to come away with that big 5-4 victory against the Charleswood Hawks, and then put up another one the game after, 5-1 against the River East Royal Knights. So, you know, outside of Transcona, this team has proven that they can be, top contenders in this league this season, like Charleswood, like St. Boniface most recently, even though it's been one time. And of course, River East, that's kind of played themselves into a championship contender type of role this season. But yeah, I mean, they've had their big moments. They've proven that they can come through in big moments. Does that continue in the playoffs? Do they need to add a bit more to this team? Honestly, I don't really think so. Like they added, you know, last season a bit. Traded away Braden Larveld this year. Haven't been active in making trades since. The only player I think that maybe they could part with is Cohen Chang, as his offensive production has been way down this season. He's played in pretty much all of this team's games too this year. I believe he's played in all 26 of them. But I feel like they're gonna have faith in him and trust that he's gonna get going at some point. And once a player like Cohen Chang can get going, he can start rolling. But the reason why I put him up there, I guess, is I think this is a player where teams would be really interested in acquiring him, and maybe a piece if they could bring in, a better group of players, a player where they would be okay parting ways with, could be a player like Cohen Chang, just because of the down year more so offensively. But I'm feeling like out of, I had bye first, I think it's going to be the latter. I think this team stands pat. I think they're going to trust in what they have. This is a team that has been playing pretty solid defensive hockey. The offensive numbers aren't even where they could be, and I feel like this team hasn't exactly even hit their full peak yet. And the fact that they're the fourth place team in the league and looking to only get better. They have a big test tonight against the Transcon Railer Express, but I feel like all the pieces are here for this team where, a big trade for a star in this league could maybe put them over the top, but I think they got to be comfortable with where they're at, what they have right now, how they're playing, continue to trust the process, and I'd say stand pat this year. And yeah, I'd say they're a huge contender this year, comparing them to some of the teams in the league. And this team as well is a contender in the Charleswood Hawks. Not really any players that stood out in terms of, like, are these players, that could draw intrigue from teams which, Charleswood would also be comfortable selling with. It's a bit harder to get a read on this team given that they were a bit younger this year, and I don't think that they would part with their vets, their older talent, in many instances. But I do think if they are going to be active 2 days before trade deadline at this point, you look to target defense. This team this season, you look at last year and how their decor was able to supply them with some good goal scoring. Now this team is fourth in goals this year. But you just take a look at the defensemen they have outside of Ridley Ringer and Tate Dolinsky, who are two rookies. They have 5 goals apiece. But outside of that, defensive scoring for this team, maybe a bit down compared to other years. Maybe that's not even the case, but overall, I feel like targeting defense could be huge for this Charleswood Hawks team. Maybe you go for a guy that, you know, can put up big offensive numbers for you while also, being able to play a solid defensive game. Maybe you look more so to, go for more of a defensive type of defenseman, right? But I think a big thing for this group, too, is most of the youth on that decor leading the way. And you take a look at the experience on their back end this year, they don't have a single player aging out. So I think that's actually more so the direction I should have taken it in. Talking about looking for a more experienced D-man to come in, a defenseman that can come in and not only supply you good two-way play, but also a defenseman where maybe you can use them in some different situations, like on your penalty kill, build some more depth there. One of the best penalty kills in the league. But yeah, there's not much for, I guess, this Charleswood Hawks team to add thinking about it. In terms of their goal scoring, like, it's pretty solid too in terms of their depth. A healthier Tyson Sperber this year has been beneficial for the most part, as he's only missed 4 games at this point. Cole Penner's been missing some time too, but recently, I guess not recently, started off the season, but has been out for quite a while. So it's going to be interesting to see where this Charleswood Hawks team could go. I don't see this team as a seller. I see them as a buyer, if anything. And yeah, maybe you look to target defense to shore up that spot on your roster. Maybe bring in some more experience there. As for the St. Boniface Riels, stand pat at this point. I think that they've proven that they're big buyers already, selling a lot of young talent over to the St. Vital Junior Victorias to bring in the likes of players like a Connor Mitchell, also bringing in the Andersons. They've parted ways with players like Aaron Birchinger, who wasn't really getting any action this year. Parted with players that could help them down the line, like Grayson Matthews, Cash Long, Robert Riley as well. But I feel like the game plan's been simple for St. Boniface in terms of they're okay with parting with young talent. We saw that last year and even, the years before that, right? They've dealt players that aren't exactly like necessary to the function of this group's main core. They've been able to keep that intact while adding to it, right? Like, I think that a lot of the work for this team to set the course for their championship run was done last year, and it's been put in place this year too for them to have a chance to run it back as back-to-back champions looking to defend their title this year. But I think that Tyler Moore and this Riels organization have done a great job already of adding players that could be significant difference makers down the line come playoff time. If you get into a chippy series, it's nice to have a guy like Connor Mitchell. This is a team that has been so good defensively, but offensively, their numbers have kind of seen them dip down to more so middle of the pack in the league in terms of goals for per game. So adding in the Andersons, right, I think fix any depth issues that you have with those players coming in. The only knock on the Andersons, I'd say, is their inability at times to stay healthy. But I feel like at this point, like, St. Boniface has traded a lot of resources already. They've been the biggest buyers out of any team so far at the trade deadline, and it'll probably stay that way. And yeah, I see this team making no more moves, standing pat, trusting in what they have, and I'd say they're geared up pretty nicely to try to defend their title. A group that is hungry to get back there and to, well, if they meet them in the finals, to knock them off. It's the Railer Express, the Transcone Railer Express. Look, this team hasn't made any trades they've made moves more so in house. Trying, I think, taking a look back, I'm not sure how many call ups they've had this year off the top of my head. But like, what's not to like about this team right now? They made it to the finals last year. Were the best team through all of 2024 last year. Had a dip second half of the season, but of course, fought through that adversity and were able to finish top three and went through quite a playoff run for themselves. And I always say it, but the playoff experience that they built up was so valuable throughout last season. It's a team that ranks first in every single category except for power play percentage, but it's still top three, 22.8%, ranking third in the league. And yeah, this team, for the most part this season, like, have just taken a look at their roster. I was thinking that they had a few players in and out of their lineup near the start of the season. They have had to, turn to some AP, some call ups due to some suspensions, maybe some injuries at some point. But overall, this is a team that hasn't really changed that much from last year to this year. Haven't made any deals during the trade deadline. The only real moves they've made is promoting guys from up, down in their lineup to up in their lineup, if anything. And yeah, it's a team that, I mean, there's nothing you'd really change right now. They pretty much got everything you'd want a championship contender to have. High level offense, which you take a look at the rest of the league, it's miles ahead of anyone, even, the second place team in terms of goals for the St. James Junior Canucks. They're 19 goals away from, this Transcona Railer Express team. And this is also a team that has the best defensive numbers in the league so far this year, too, right? As mentioned, the least goals against. So not only do they have the numbers, but they have the talent to back it up. I'd say the deepest forward group in the league, led by the likes of players like Nolan Vandenbush, Ryder McClure, Nathan Turner's back to leading this team in goals. On the defensive side of things, a plethora of players that can play such a solid two-way game and get really involved offensively. Like Caden Bruchansky as a defenseman this year has 9 goals in 24 games played, 21 points. It's insane. And then, like, I'd say the biggest loss that this team probably had was losing Logan Maroney in net, but Wyatt Thomas has come in and done himself an exceptional job. He's only lost 1 game this year, right? And as we showed you, the stats leaders in the mmjhl for Thomas Wyatt, he is at a 9-1 record with a 9.31 save percentage. So, there's no holes on this team. And sure, if you go out and make a big move, like, that could make you better, but you risk giving up, pretty good talent going back the other way. Plus, do you really want to mess with the mojo of this group right now? That proved last year with pretty much the same group, aside from a few of the new additions that they're able to get to the championship series. Like, I just don't really think it's necessary for this Transcon Railer Express team, this version of them, to make trades. They didn't make any big moves last year either. They've trusted in this young group heading back a few years ago up until this point now, and it's looking like it's paid off so far. They just gotta to finish the job at this point. But you look at the moves that St. Boniface was making. I have a theory that they were making the moves, bringing in the Anderson twins, as well as going out and getting a Connor Mitchell, exactly for a type of opponent like the Transcon Railer Express, because maybe they're looking ahead and thinking that it could potentially be them and Transcona in the finals. Now, that's not to say that that's set in stone, but just the way St. Boniface has been preparing, I feel like that's for Transcona and what they have, and that's a huge nod to that team and what they're doing and what they've been building throughout the past few years. So yeah, for me, Transcona, not only the team to beat, but a team, in my opinion, that right away feel like they don't even have to think about buying or selling Stan Pat. Probably the easiest decision out of the teams in terms of where I was going to group them in. Transcona being in that category was a lot, just in terms of just how well built that team is. Where as for the Transcona Railer Express, we'll have a chance to see them on our network coming up tonight against the Stonewall Jets. Now, this game is going to be really intriguing as the Transcon Railer Express, of course, the biggest win streak in the league. Stonewall's coming off of two back-to-back big wins for themselves, and this is going to be a pretty fast game, I'd say, tonight. Could expect both goaltenders to be on, whether that's Wyatt or Delarone in net for Transcona. I'd have to assume that Spencer Hunnam gets the nod for Stonewall in this game, but yeah, as much as I just talked up Transcona, I feel like if they matched up with Stonewall, if any of the top three teams match up with Stonewall in, say, the Final Four, that is going to be a really tough series because, look, this team plays fast, and this is a team that has pretty much all the same players from last year coming back to this year. Finally got a taste of playoff hockey for the first time as a group last season and have only built off of that experience this year. And I feel like if found ways right to beat some of the best teams in the league, that's given them some confidence. And I feel like in this game, going into it tonight at home, having the hottest team, the number one team heading in, and you want to extend your win streak to 3, would not be surprised if Stonewall is really up for this game and they push Transcona to their limit, and wouldn't be surprised to see them come away with an upset based off of what they can do with their speed, with their game, and given that, Transcona, their most recent matchup against St. James, they only won 4-3, and I'd argue that Stonewall has even more speed. They can play you really aggressive, and I'd say they do have a better goaltender than Spencer Hunnam, one of my top goaltenders in the league this season. But should be really interesting. That game gets going at 8 p.m. tonight at Stonewall Veterans Memorial Sports Complex, and Bentley Brent will have a call on our Uscreen channel. As for River East and St. Vital, that's a game that I'm going to be calling tonight with our main G Show Productions crew. And yeah, it's two teams that have, of course, faced off a few times against each other before already this season. As for the River East Royal Knights, felt like they had a really good start against the St. Boniface Riels last Friday in the return to play, but then their play kind of dipped off as that game went along. But like I've said, they've done some really good things this season, and I feel like St. Vital is just in such a slide right now where I'm not sure where that group's confidence is at, but I'm sure it's pretty good. Like, this has been a St. Vital Junior Victoria's team that have held their heads high pretty well for the most part this year, even though things have looked pretty dire in these last 9 games for this team. But look, River East, they have St. Vital's number this year. They've beaten them all 3 times that they've played. For River East 2 this year, it's a bit of a different team compared to other years, right? Like, they got some good depth, some good pieces up front. Their defense, they've seen some good offensive contributions from them this season. I'd say for St. Vital tonight, when taking a look at the numbers, what you're banking on is that, your special teams can step up maybe. Although this is the most penalized team in the league. Yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers, St. Vital, they do average a lot of shots per game at 41.7 compared to 37.9 they give up. I would expect this game to be quite a high shot total game, given that these two teams like to play some run and gun, like to turn games into a track meet, try to use their speed. I think that's going to be the biggest part for St. Vital tonight is, can you get to your speed? Can you, enter into their zone successfully most times, establish that offensive zone time for yourselves to put pressure on River East. I think if St. Vital is able to do that, go to the net hard and capitalize. Kyle Bielman's been really solid, but there's been times where River East is seeing themselves get hemmed in, and their goaltenders haven't exactly made those key big saves, right? So River East is going to need their goaltending to be sharp tonight. St. Vital is going to need to capitalize on their opportunities at a high level. And for St. Vital, just continue to try to look for consistency, right? We've seen so many teams this year and even throughout the past few seasons. St. Vital has had a really great period, and then the next period it looks like a different hockey team, or even like for 5 minutes they look great, and then the next five they don't look so good. So consistency, huge for St. Vital. Getting the speed, I think, gives them their biggest chance to win tonight. Also staying disciplined. Even though they've taken close to 700 penalty minutes, being disciplined is going to be huge in this one. And of course, yeah, for River East, looking for big time goaltending, trusting in your process, and hoping you can get the speed and that your forecheck is able to take over this game. Because when River East can get their forecheck going, it is one of the best in the league, to be honest with you, just from seeing it this season. But those games will be getting going tonight, 7:30 p.m. for us at St. Vital Centennial Arena, 8 p.m. in Stonewall for Prairie Sports Network and their crew, who, of course, partnered with us at gshow Productions for this season. Friday, we're going to have only one game for you, and that's going to be Charleswood and St. James. Should be a really good game between one of the up-and-coming team that continues to rise up in the ranks in the mmjhl, and the St. James Junior Canucks taking on an established top 3 seed at this point in the Charleswood Hawks. Canucks Hawks get going tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. at Eric Coy Arena. And as for us this weekend, we won't have any games broadcasted for you on Sunday, but yeah, some great games there. St. Boniface, St. James should be a physical matchup. Transcona, River East should be really interesting to see how River East fares in that one. I'd say maybe the game of the month. Fortunate we can't cover it, but maybe tomorrow. Transcona taking on St. Boniface. St. Boniface looking to avenge their loss from the last time these two teams played, when Transcona was finally able to deliver a blow to the loss column in the season series this year. That season series is now 2-1 for St. Boniface. Could potentially be tied coming up after this weekend, and pretty interesting too. Transcona, River East, St. Vital, and Stonewall, none of these teams getting days off, as they'll be playing on back-to-backs from tonight into tomorrow. Full schedule is on the mmjhl's website at mmjhl.ca, but just to let you know the games that we'll be covering, we've already told you, but we'll have 3 for you on a lighter weekend of games for us on our schedule, as we're quite busy with the female hockey side of things this weekend coming up, which should be exciting in its own right. But we're going to take another commercial break here, and then I'll be back for some final words on this edition of the mmjhl podcast.
Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia offers the widest selection of sports cards and signed memorabilia in the city. For dedicated casual and new collectors, Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia has everything a collector could ask for. Everything we sell is stored with care, and with help from our knowledgeable team, we'll help you find exactly what you're looking for. We carry Upper Deck hockey card brands like Series 1 and 2, The Cup, Ultimate, SPA, and plenty more. So what are you waiting for? Come down to Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia, Winnipeg's premier sports cards and memorabilia store.
Well, you've made it to the end of this edition of the mmjhl podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you did to this one, want to thank Terrico, goaltenders, movement, fitness, and performance elite prospects, and Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia for sponsoring another edition of the mmjhl podcast. Special thanks to you, the viewer, for tuning in as well. If you are new to the mmjhl podcast, if this is your first time seeing this content on our YouTube channel, if this is your first time seeing us in general, Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to consider subscribing, turn on notifications so you don't miss any future uploads of this podcast and any other content that we have coming out. I also want to let you know that if you are a subscriber on our Uscreen service, you may notice that there have been games disappearing from October, for example. The reason for that is we cover a lot of leagues. We cover on our Uscreen, I think it's like, let's do some quick math here. About 55 teams in total, which means that yeah, there's a lot of games to be broadcasted, and in terms of pay-per-view services, Uscreen is, of course, the one we use, and there are platform fees to use it. So I actually upgraded my hours back in September to add more live streaming so we wouldn't be charged with overages. So, like, we started off with 90 hours per month to live stream at, right? Or 60 hours per month. Well, with high school hockey, female hockey league coverage, and the mmjhl, those hours rack up quite a bit in a month. So, yeah, just in terms of, I guess, I'm rambling on now, but uh, to make the story shorter, live hours, those reset every month, but video hours in terms of videos being stored, those don't reset monthly. So we only get a certain amount of those, and if we get over the amount that we have, then we get charged, and then that is not sustainable for us. So what we're going to be doing is, for any games that we're going to be taking off of our Uscreen, they're going to be the oldest games. So we're now in January. October games are all off. Next are going to be the November games. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be posting them on YouTube. If you want a copy for yourself, be sure to reach out to us. I'll put our email in the description of each podcast episode moving forward. But yeah, just to let you know, if you're wondering where the games are going, don't worry, they're not gone forever. We're going to post them on our YouTube, and we're thinking at that point, if no one's paid for them in January and it's an October game, people are probably not going to pay for it at this point, right? So yeah, that's the reason why, as part of many reasons why we're starting to offload content on our Uscreen service. So just wanted to clarify that. That's all for today. Be sure to check out Vic's Royal Knights tonight, as well as Jets and Railer Express. It should be another thrilling night of mmjhl game day. Can't wait for it. We'll be back for the mmjhl podcast coming out next week on Thursday for episode 12 in season 3. For season 3, episode 11, I've been your host, Graham, the G Show Forsyth. Peacing out and waving so long, mmjhl fans. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting as always.